Hello everyone, this is Nick Hodges, the Delphi Product Manager, and welcome to another edition of Turbo Delphi Demos. Today I'm going to be demoing another feature of the IDE, and that is refactoring. Now refactoring is the process of restructuring and rewriting your code in order to make it more readable and more maintainable. And the key, of course, is that you don't change the functionality of your code, just to simply change the structure of your code. Refactoring by definition means that you change the code but you don't change its functionality. If you do change its functionality, then you're not refactoring. So anyway, the IDE in Turbo Delphi has a lot of refactoring functionality built right into it that enables you to easily and quickly refactor your code. That is, rearrange it in a way that is easier to read, more efficient, more effective, and more maintainable. So I got some code here. It's a simple application that does some work of just handling number of days and hours passed since a given date or whatever. I stole this example code from Charlie Calvert, a longtime Delphi author and community member who actually now works for Microsoft, but it's still good code. And it shows some things that you might want to think about when you're refactoring your code. Now, chances are you actually refactor your code now, you just don't realize it. You manually refactor it. Sometimes you might look at some code and go, I need to put that in its own method or procedure or whatever. You might rename some variables because the variable names are not any good. You might move fields around, or fields or methods up and down inside of classes and things like that. And we'll look at a few of those things that the IDE does for you automatically that makes refactoring your code a lot easier. For instance, if you were to look at the code here in this button days past click or the button hours past click event handler, you might look and you might see, there's some variable names here that look kind of short. They're just D, M, and Y, and they're fields on the class or whatever. And you might think to yourself, well, those aren't very good names. So you think, I might want to rename that. And then you'd notice too that the values here are fields, so you might want to put some conventional names on them, like the F prefix to name them as fields of a class. So you might come down and highlight D, for instance, and then go up to the refactor menu and select rename, which will bring up a dialog box that will allow you to rename the variable D, say, to F day. Now, I'm going to select view references before refactoring and then click OK. And what that'll do is it'll bring up this little refactoring dialog box, and it'll tell you all the places that it's going to change the value of D. Now you notice that it's smart enough to go through the entire application, including perhaps other units that are in the application. In this case, it's all in one unit. But if there were other units that use this variable as well, it would search those out and find them all. And once I press the Go ahead and refactor button, you'll notice then that now all of the instances of of just plain D have been changed to F day. And I can very easily do the same thing for F month. Whoops, wrong button. And I can do it for Y as well. And I can even hit Control-Shift-V, which, excuse me, I'm not sorry, Control-Shift-E, not Control-Shift-V, Control-Shift-E, which will bring up that, and I can type F year as well, and I can also deselect the view of the references, and it'll just automatically do it for you. So now you notice I was able to rename all of those things in every location where they were used by simply passing along, by doing a single refactoring, rename, refactoring. Okay, the next thing you might notice is that a big chunk of this code here and this code here are basically identical. Matter of fact, I think they are exactly identical. And so you might think to yourself, well, that's redundant. I don't need to have the same code twice in two different places. I can have it once in one place and call it twice. Well, here's what's fun. The extract method refactoring allows you to do that. I can highlight all of this code, right-click, and select extract method, and then I can give the new method a new name called get date. Say just call it get date info, and then I can click OK, and you'll notice that it has created for me a new function called a procedure called get date info with all of that code in it, and it's replaced that code with a call to get date info. So now I can come down here and do the same thing, just manually. I have to do it here, called get date info, And now I have some slightly refactored code, i.e. it's a little more efficient than it was before. It's got some better variable names, and I did that using the extract info and rename refactorings. Now there's another pretty straightforward refactoring that you might use that is very convenient, and that is the declare variable refactoring. And I'm just going to do a kind of artificial one here that will illustrate that. I might declare, for instance, temp day as a variable, and I might start typing it. I actually haven't declared it as a variable. I just have typed temp day, and then I might just copy this here or cut it, put this up here, and then come down and just eventually assign it to temp day. And I could come in and go, temp day gets temp day +1 minus 4 plus 3. I might manipulate it in some way. I mean, it's a foolish example, but it obviously wouldn't change the value there, right? But then now you notice I'm getting the error insight for that because it hasn't been declared. Well, if I right-click and select refactoring and I go declare variable, it actually was smart enough to notice that it's going to be an integer. I click OK, and it has now declared for me a variable called temp day that I can then use. So that's nice for declaring variables for you automatically instead of having to move back and forth up to the beginning of the procedure to create or declare that variable. Okay, so I'm going to show some of the further demo refactorings deal with class libraries and class structures. So I'm going to go ahead and add a unit to this project, and I'm going to then go ahead in the interface and I'm going to declare some classes. So the first class I'm going to declare is the we'll call it T grandparent class, and that'll be our base class. And then, of course, we'll go T parent class equals class, and then I'll have T child class gets class. And now I'm going to have the T parent class descend from T grandparent class, and I'm going to have T child class descend from T parent class, like so. Okay, and next up I'm going to have each one of these these classes have a procedure, just a basic procedure on them. Do something, and then this one will be called procedure do this, and then maybe it'll take a string parameter, and then this one will have, say, a function called create that, or how about not create? I don't want to confuse that with a constructor. We'll call it generate that. Takes a parameter of type integer. Let's have it take 2 parameters, and it'll return a string itself. Then we can hit Control-Shift-C, and on each of these classes, and I'll go ahead and stop the tape and just put some simple code in there to make these actually do something. So hang on one sec. Okay, I'm back. I've just fleshed out these classes just a little bit to do something, so that there's a little code in there. It's completely meaningless, really, but just illustrates what you can do with refactoring. Now, it may happen that I might want to start rearranging some of the functionality of these classes. I may think to myself, for whatever reason, that, say, function generate that, it doesn't need to be in the child class. I want to actually pull that up into the parent class. And so actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the model view here of our code, and I'm going to use that to start manipulating or refactoring these classes. So for instance, I might think to myself, I want this do this method here to be in the grandparent class. So I can just simply grab it and drag it and move it up, and now suddenly, boom, it's there. Then I might think, oh no, my child class should have nothing in it, and then I can rearrange it here. And you'll notice that the code over here is being automatically recreated as I drag and drop these items around from class to class. Those are the same thing as the pull members up class. Now another thing you can do, of course, is you can select these items, say, here, and you can select those items, and then you can select refactoring for, such as, for instance, extract interface, and I can call it my interface. And once I've done that, the class will then go ahead and it'll extract an interface out called my interface. It'll grab the procedures and information from the class, and then it'll actually declare the tParent class as having selected implemented the my interface. Then I think to myself, oh, look what I did. I forgot to put an I on the front of it, so I can rename it. I can just go my interface, since all good interfaces by convention are declared by I, or started by I, and there you go. Now I've rearranged things a little bit, and I've extracted an interface and whatnot. Another thing I can do, of course, is I can right-click and go Add Procedure, and then I can say call it Added Procedure. And I can do this all within the model view of the application. Let me size this up a little bit so that there's a little more room. And now you notice that I have grandparent class actually has something called Added Procedure. And I can actually say, I'd like some parameters on those, so I can go Change Params. So now I can add a parameter if I want. I want to call the parameter my new param, and I can name it a data type of, say, double, just for the sake of argument here. DOUBLE, right? And I can add another parameter too of type another param. You notice I can actually have a list of types here that I can pick from, and I think, just for fun, I'll pick out I don't know, a message. Let's see, what would be a fun type to do? Well, something a little less. Oh, p-word. How about p-word? Whatever. And I can actually select it as a const if I want to, whatever. And it can be a default parameter with a value of 0. How about? And I can do that. I click OK, and now you'll notice that once I click this button here, I can now manually add those procedures. And the cool thing is that it adds them there, and it also adds them down here in the interface section, so you don't have to constantly be banging back and forth, declaring things up and down and left and right and all that. So there's some other refactorings that you can do. You can extract an interface. You can extract a superclass. So for instance, if I selected this item here and went extract superclass, I can say new class in the same unit, or I could put it into a different unit if I wanted to, and select OK. Run the refactoring. And now you'll notice I've got a class called new class here that actually is a I should rename to T-new class. I'll use the rename refactoring here, T-new class. And it is now part of our class hierarchy, right? Okay, and there's some other fun things you can kind of do with this. You can actually select these items using the model view over here in the object inspector, and you can do things like, if I typed in the author, I can type in Nick Hodges, and it will actually add the 3/ comments with the author, little XML comments in here. And I can also say, if I wanted new class to implement an interface, for instance, I could go and find my interface. I could add that, and I could say OK, and you'll notice that now the class descends from T-interfaced object, and it implements my interface, and it has for you added in the added procedure item into the the my interface. It has the added procedure was there already. And then of course you would have to come in and implement those interfaces yourself. But be that as it may, those are all nice refactoring things you can do with the refactoring engine inside Turbo Delphi. So that's a quick look at all the refactorings inside of Turbo Delphi. I appreciate your time, and see you next time on Turbo Delphi Demos.